Oh, it's been a whirlwind few weeks catching back up after that trip to Kelowna. We just got off site today. We're sitting down. We've got a few hours to bang out filming this, and then it's off to another project. Speaking of that trip to Kelowna, what an awesome, huge project that is turning out to be, and I'm super excited to fill you guys all in, so that's coming soon. But it's been a while, and it's great to see all of your smiling faces again, and today we're going to talk all about range hoods. When it comes to range hoods, there's two main categories out there. Recirculating, those are the ones that vent the air back into your home, and then there's those that vent the air directly outside, otherwise known as vented range hoods. Now today, it really doesn't matter what model you go with because most of them are capable of doing either option depending on your needs. Let's talk about vented range hoods first because this is always my first choice when it comes to planning any sort of kitchen design. A vented range hood is exactly as it sounds. It sucks the air from inside your home, all those smells, all those cooking oils, any unburnt fumes, all of that gets sucked up and vented directly outside. Typically, this is pretty easy to see because you'll see a vent going up through a cabinet or you'll see it extending to the outside of the home. But if you aren't sure or can't find any sign of it inside, head to the outside. You'll typically see some sort of small grate on the outside of your house or a stack going up through your roof. Speaking of venting, this is really where vented range hoods can have a massive impact on kitchen design. In older homes or older renovations, you typically see a stack or some sort of duct coming out of the range hood up through a cabinet above. It would be typically kind of like an under cabinet range hood. And then it would go near the ceiling and head towards the outer wall. Typically, we didn't see ranges on exterior walls, at least not here where I renovate and work locally. Now, if you're planning a renovation, this can continue to work. You can go up, you can go to the right or left and exit to your exterior of your house. But that all depends on whether or not you have the space to allocate towards that duct. Now, this can pose a problem if you want to run cabinets all the way to the ceiling and you don't want some sort of crown molding or bulkhead at the top. Now you need to deal with that particular ductwork. Another common hiccup you can run into with venting is if you're planning for downdraft range hoods in the island themselves. This needs to be thought of very early in the renovation stages because that ductwork needs to tuck itself underneath your flooring. Now, you don't typically see these options on houses built on slab, or it would be half buried in the slab. Again, not something we commonly see, but it is pretty common up here where we have basements or crawl spaces and there is room to run that ductwork. However, you need to keep in mind the direction in which your floor joists run because that can also dictate how you're going to vent that downdraft hood to the outside. No matter which model of vented range hood you choose, it needs to follow the manufacturer's recommendations and local building codes. That means the ductwork needs to be the appropriate size. You need to seal all of your joints along the way, eliminate as many of those twists and turns as you can, and make sure that it's not a massive distance to the exterior. All of these things are going to impact flow rate and how well that range hood will function once it's installed. All right, let's talk about some of the advantages of a vented range hood. First and foremost, they typically flow or pull more air than a recirculating model will. This simply means that you're going to be pulling more air from inside your home, so more of those cooking oils, those fumes, from inside and venting them outside. You definitely need to be careful here though, because as you creep up in CFM, you can start creating inconsistencies or imbalances with the rest of the HVAC system in your home. This is typically why you'll find there's some building codes, depending on where you are, that require another blower unit that's going to suck in fresh air at the same time as your exhaust fan is pulling air out of your house. This keeps your whole balance intact and you don't need to worry about, again, creating those imbalances from too many CFM being pulled out. Speaking of CFM, make sure to stick around to the end. I'm going to give you some basic calculations to help figure out how powerful your range hood should be. Another benefit to vented range hoods is that you don't require any additional filters beyond just that initial grease filter that all models have. This means you don't need to go out and find charcoal or carbon filters that are going to slot in place and be replaced throughout the life of that particular unit, as we will see with ductless or recirculating models. The last benefit I want to talk about is that vented range hoods pull out the moist air from cooking and vent it directly outside. They pull out unburnt fumes, again, directly venting it outside. Now, any moist air or cooking oils, that can be a really big benefit, getting rid of it, getting it out of your kitchen, because it's not going to build up or condensate anywhere else in your house. Now, there are a few disadvantages to going with a vented model. First and foremost, well, it needs to be vented. This means you need access to the outside of your house in some way or another, through the floor, a wall, or the roof. Actually, quick tangent here. If we remember back to our grade school science days, hot air or heat rises. So in any instance, whenever I'm doing an install or any sort of kitchen plan, I'm looking for the most natural way for that air to exit the house. Finally, when it comes to vented units, it just increases the cost of the renovation. Generally, venting or ductwork and maybe the extra carpentry that goes along with it can cost a few hundred to maybe several $1,000s, depending on how complicated the design is and whether you need to exit a stone or brick wall on your house. Alrighty, let's move along to ductless or recirculating range hoods, and this is exactly as the name sounds. It recirculates the air from inside your home to back inside your home, so the air is never exiting your house. The main difference between these and vented models comes down to filtration. Ductless range hoods take advantage of carbon or charcoal filters. Now, the main goal here is the air is sucked up into the unit, it's passed through those filters with the goal of purifying it as much as possible, removing as many odors, as many fumes, whatever it possibly can before sending that air back into your kitchen space. Now, the important thing to remember here is those carbon and those charcoal filters need to be in place, and they need to be changed at regular intervals along with whatever your model particularly needs. There are a couple advantages to going with a recirculating model in your kitchen. The first and foremost isn't really even to do with the range hood itself, but it's the freedom of design. Not having to worry about access to the exterior means you can place your range hood, you can plop it anywhere in your kitchen that you want it. I guess you could also consider the simplicity of install here a benefit as well. There's no need to spend any extra money on design or construction costs in terms of running vents and planning for how that air is going to exit your house. However, if I'm being honest here, this is not something I would ever let come into my decision making, whether I went the recirculating or the vented route. You're already going to be spending so much money on a kitchen renovation that there are probably many better places that you can save a few $100s in the overall grand scheme. Let's get into the disadvantages of recirculating range hoods. And for me, the biggest problem or the biggest downside to them is those carbon or charcoal filters. It seems easy enough in the beginning to just plop them in place and boom, range hood's installed and you're good to go. However, you need to continually replace those filters over the entire life that you own that particular hood. This means that years down the line, those range hood filters might not be as easy to find and you're gonna have to hunt them down. This becomes a bit of an inconvenience. There's also just the sheer fact that you need to remember to change that filter every few months. The other big downside to them is they don't pull any of that moisture or any of those fumes out of the house. So remember earlier I talked about if you're cooking for a while or a long time in cold climates, that hot air is going to build up in your kitchen space, which sure might make the area nice and warm. However, it's going to need to condense somewhere. And typically we find this occurring on our windows, which again is going to create a whole other host of problems. Let's come full circle now and talk about size. One of the most common questions, actually probably the most common question I'm asked is how many CFM does it pull? How much CFM do I need? What size of range hood should I put in my kitchen? And thankfully, there's a general rule and some very basic math that can get us in the right ballpark. So if you are using an induction or an electric cooktop or stovetop or range top, whatever it might be, you want roughly 100 CFM per linear foot of cooking surface. So if you've got a 36-inch range, you're gonna look for something that's got a minimum of about 300 CFM. Now it's a little different when we get into the world of gas. The rule here is 100 CFM per roughly 10,000 BTUs. So again, if we've got a gas range or a gas cooktop or stovetop with a 50,000 BTU total amount of burners, we're looking for a range hood that can pull around 500 CFM. Now, as I mentioned earlier, this is roughly when we're gonna start seeing those air movement problems. So if we're pulling out 800, 900 or over 1,000 CFM, we're gonna start creating problems with the rest of our HVAC system, especially when we're building houses, as tight as they are today. So typically you'll find local building codes are gonna require a specific blower that turns on in another room somewhere else in the house that's gonna suck in an equal amount of air as that range hood is pulling out. This is just something to keep in mind because if you're going with, say, a really high-end pro-style gas range and you need a 1,300 CFM range hood, well, you're probably also gonna have to worry about that extra cost when it comes to that blower and pulling air back into your home. All right, back to our general rules of thumb, there's two other things we need to consider. Height can also play a role in how much air is taken up. So for every 3 inches you move a range hood above a manufacturer's recommendation, add roughly 100 CFM. And finally, islands can also come into play here, or cooktops in our island. So island range hoods have to worry about cross drafts where wall range hoods do not. So in this particular case, we add a little bit more to the calculation and we make it 150 CFM per linear foot of electric cooking surface. And we add roughly 100 CFM to our total calculation when it comes to gas. Remember though, these are just recommendations, they're general rules to get you into the right ballpark. And how you cook can also impact what you need. For example, if you aren't cooking a ton on high heat, generating a ton of steam, or you're not doing a lot of grilling or frying, you might be able to get away with a unit that doesn't require quite as many CFM as what that general calculation might suggest. So which should you choose? Well, ultimately that's up to you, but I think vented range hoods are hands down the better option. They pull out those oils, that moisture, any smells, and even unburnt fumes from our gas ranges. You don't need to worry about any carbon or charcoal filters being replaced, and you don't need to think about your range hood once it's installed. Just turn it on and use it. And I've never come across a kitchen, I don't think I've ever come across a kitchen where we just simply couldn't vent the range in one way or another and had to go to a ventless option. As always, thanks a ton for watching this week's video. I'm so happy when you guys join me. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Maybe leave a comment for me down below. I love hearing from all of you in your own kitchen adventures. If you're looking to continue down this rabbit hole of kitchen design, I've queued a couple more videos up for you here. And until next time, bye-bye.